The massive release of Rome Total Realism Imperium Surrectum is upon us, and if you follow the mod like I have, this hype is quite unlike any other. A month ago I made a grand reveal of the brand new campaign map for the mod, including the new remastered units, all of which will make this release that much more special. As part of this massive release, some of the team members at RIS have been kind enough to sit down with me and talk to me about their mod, both present and future, some of the community's wishes, a few juicy feature details, and about the team itself. And without any further introduction, let's hear what the team behind one of Total War's most ambitious mods has to share with us. So welcome one, welcome all, I'm very happy to have you here on the channel. Thank you so much for being here. As I'm sure you're well aware, both me and my viewers love you guys and everything you do, but we mostly know you for your work, of course. So today I have with me Ahowl, Mosca Flaka, and Vic Boss. And let's start with Mosca, shall we? What do you do on the mod?
Well, I kind of dip my toes in everything at this point. I've done coding stuff, I've done art stuff, campaign and battle balance stuff. Lately, my main kind of task has been to make the unit cards. So all of the new units that have new unit cards, I don't want to say every single one of them, but I've made the vast majority of them. For me, what's really important in the mod is making sure that the gameplay is challenging but fun. So I pay a lot of attention to kind of campaign and battle balance to make sure that battles and campaigns are fun and challenging. And I'm also the guy who's laughing at the people who say it's too hard.
What do I do on the mod, Mosca? I don't know.
You're a valued advisor who has lots of great insight.
You could call me a glorified beta tester, I guess, Andy. Like, I don't code or anything. I don't work on any art or anything, but I'm always around on the mod, and whenever there's a new release, I'm always playing it, and I'm testing the gameplay and the balance of the economy. Really, I always give my input to Mosca and Howl. I guess lately I've been a little bit more active, just the tiniest bit, by organizing some of the other beta testers we have to kind of like direct them to things that we want to test. But really, my main focus is kind of just playing the game and then offering my opinion on how the balance is. And like Mosca, I also laugh at people who think it's too hard, because for me, I want it to be like 10 times harder than it is now.
I'm Ahowl, a mod leader and founder of RIS. Lead and direct. I also do a ton of coding, and I do a lot of other miscellaneous stuff. So my hands are basically everywhere. I try not to get too deep into one thing, but especially with coding, it's almost impossible. But my hands really aren't on the art. I kind of let Tone be the co-lead in that regard. He just kind of pretty much made his own little artist team. Him and I talk about weekly. But as far as just like the mod as a whole, I would say I'm the leader, the director, and I guess you could say I'm the initiator, because we have such a good team and we're so close and we're very honest with each other to a fault. But that's the way I like it. I'll have a ton of ideas and I'll want to do things a certain way, and I get shot down all the time. And sometimes I have to be like put in a straitjacket. I so badly want things to be a certain way, but everybody else is like unanimously against me. And I'm like, okay, well, if it was up to me, we'd probably have like 150 factions already. I always have ideas for factions, more factions, and they're constantly like, no more factions. We're good. So I'm lucky to get 50. We have 50. I think we'll have 50 playable factions. No, 49 or 50, something like that in the next release, which is really awesome. But yeah, I look at the map. I'm like, oh, we could add a faction here. We could add a faction there. We could do this. How long is that going to take? Who's going to do that work? That's kind of my role. Making sure things get done, planning out how everything's going to go, getting people to stay together, and sometimes I recruit new people. I do a lot of the public relations work with you. Like, me and you have been in contact for a long time, as well as other people. I guess my role is just to represent RIS as best I can.
In the time since last release, we've seen around half a year pass by. What in particular, or in general, made this dev cycle so much longer than normal? And how did the team decide on such a massive update?
With the huge new map, for example, this Lucid Empire starts with over 100 cities. It's getting that to work has been a challenge, and we're making progress on that, but we're basically in uncharted waters, and we're basically trying to like push boundaries that haven't been reached ever before and like go way far beyond those boundaries. boundaries that we thought would never be possible to pass.
So when it comes to the decision-making process, you know, we're a pretty big team and we're all very passionate about what we're doing. And I remember in March, I think I know I didn't really necessarily want to do a huge dev cycle. I had, in my mind, I felt like we had one more release in us for the old map, the 040 map, which is like Mundus Magnus, and others wanted to move on from it, especially Jorloff, the wizard. He's like, hey, it's 050, it's kind of like a big number. We should have like a big release. Let's do the map. I'm like, that's a lot of work. I don't think we're going to be able to do that in 90 days. And kind of came together and we're like, all right, we're going to do 2 dev cycles put together. So instead of a 90-day dev cycle, it's going to be a 6-month dev cycle. And we just need to, because Tone, our unit maker at the same time, was like, I'm going to get all the Greek units made. So there was big stuff, like big, huge map, all these units. And we hadn't even made a unit yet. So this is March and we hadn't even made a unit yet. Tone was making weapons and armor and just learning how things worked. And so we didn't really know what to expect. The map was kind of made, but not filled with regions. And at this time, it was a smaller map. So about the same size as EB2's map. You know, we planned on filling that with regions. So that was the reason why we did that. Will we do it again? No. It's a big stressful thing when you are putting so much weight on your shoulders to have this huge, awesome release. And it really tests your limits. And I don't think modding, which is a hobby, a glorified hobby, I guess you could say, should be that way. Like, it's not like we're in this 9-to-5 job getting paid a certain amount of money. We're literally just doing this on our free time. And so to put all that pressure on ourselves was not the best. But the really awesome thing is we've all become better at what we do. Nobody quit. So we survived. But definitely we're not doing that again. So for you and like everybody else, expect quicker releases. But the content isn't going to be like as gigantic as this is going to be. It's going to be more refined and more kind of focused on certain things. It's almost like this one is like a new beginning. In my opinion, it's kind of like we're starting fresh. And so because of that, we needed more time to do it. We got a lot finished. We had to scrap a lot of things for later, and we're almost done. And it's a very exciting time.
Of course, choosing to double the dev cycle is no easy task, I imagine. One which I'm sure was hard to manage and commit to.
Yeah, it was, because I've worked on projects before. So Rome Total Realism 8 years ago, we did a massive release and it tore the team apart. We split after. Everybody went their own way. We were all so dogged tired that like nobody came back together. I went on and modded my own mod, and other people went on and did their own things, and we pretty much all stayed in contact. But there's a few key members of our team that I have yet to hear from in years. You know, it's like people kind of disappear when stuff like that happens. Wow. And so when I started modding on my own, I limited myself to like 30-day releases or 60-day releases. I was really short, and my vanilla enhancement mod, it was like every couple months there was a release. And for me, working solo with outside help from multiple people here and there, it was like a motivating thing. It was like a building blocks, right? Like every release felt good. So it's like, instead of trying to make this perfect mod and take years into it and never release it, let's just keep releasing in phases. And it seemed to really work. And it also generated a lot of hype. Like people were following it because people are like, oh, this guy's actually releasing stuff. Started building a little community with it. And when I got into RIS, I was like, like what if we do the same strategy? Like, why don't we just break up development into multiple phases and just every few months or like 60 to 90 days, it's just boom, release. And it was working. When Rome Remastered was first being developed and we were first putting out releases, there was a lot of unknowns. There was a lot of negative attention towards Rome Remastered. And so it was kind of like, just keep releasing stuff. Then the latest huge update, and then our latest release, it was kind of like, it's a crossroads, right? Like we're using old Rome Total War units and we're using this old map, and it got us by. But now Feral is done, right? For the most part, they're going to still bug fix and stuff, but as far as development of Rome Remastered, they were finished and they were moving on to other things. And so I think the thought process was like, okay, like how long are we going to keep the old units? And how long are we going to keep this old map? It's probably time to just like the sooner the better. I agree with that. When I look back on it, I think it was the right decision to do that. I think we could have probably handled it better. We probably could have planned it better, and that's on me as a leader. And I could have probably done a better job. But the way I saw it, I just saw the workload, and I'm like, there's just no way we're going to be able to do this. Tone and his units, and then Jorloff and his map, both were like gigantic projects. So we had to put them together as one big project, and then extend the dev cycle 3 months, and at the expense of, release and more attention and more exposure. But I'll tell you this, we almost extended it to December. We were almost going to do this until December. Tone wanted to get all Greek units done, right? Not just the Hellenistic units that we have, but Greek units. But midway through the summer, he was just kind of like, hey, yeah, like we're going to get lucky to get like the Hellenistic units done before the end of September. And then other people started speaking up. They're like, we can't wait that long on a release. And so that's what we decided to do.
So guys, I want to know, first of all, what is 0.5 all about? What does the map mean to a Total War mod? And what exactly is your favorite feature right now?
First of all, the map, but second, and just as important, we've made a bunch of new units with new models and new textures, tons of variation within those units. Those new units is like a preview for what's to come in the future for the rest of the factions, but that takes a really long time. We're thinking of doing it kind of like faction by faction or culture by culture. We want every other unit to be eventually the new, really beautiful, really nice looking units.
A lot of the work that Mosca and Tone and these, like the artists have done, it's bringing the models of Rome Total War Remastered to a graphical level that it really surpasses Rome 2 at this point, like on stuff that they're actually finished. If you zoom in and look at this stuff, it's really beautiful. Like the graphics are incredible. I think it might have been Rome 2 that added it first, where a unit would actually have like ethnic differences within the unit. Like you could see, a guy of this skin tone and a guy of this skin tone, a guy wearing something different compared to the guy right next to him. And that's kind of the stuff that they're doing on every single unit of the mod, which is going to take forever, but it's going to look amazing when it's done.
The map is the heartbeat of every mod. Without a good map, the mod struggles. Our, unreleased map, it was the biggest size of a Rome Total War map that had ever been made before. And so Jorloff kind of did that. He's like, okay, well, I know what the maximum limit is. I'll make that. Well, when we started adding regions, there's just regions on regions on regions. And it's like certain areas are just so jam-packed full of immersive history. And it's like, it wouldn't be fair to add this one without adding this one, and just kind of piled on top of each other. And at the end of the day, it was like the end of July, and we're just kind of looking at like, this is good, but it's really packed. Maybe this isn't going to be good for gameplay. It just doesn't look good either. And though we always thought that expanding the map to be even bigger was impossible, but Edwin, the lead guy from Feral, was like, you need to give it a shot because we cleaned up a lot of the internal code and the engine has really been updated and cleaned, and we did the best we could and we fixed a lot of issues. It's worth seeing if you can make it bigger, because we think that there's a domino effect here. And we're like, let's just see what happens. Let's just double or quadruple it or whatever and just see what comes about. And then lo and behold, it just worked. And I remember thinking like, what the hell is going on? This is a game changer. We went from regular size map with a ton of regions on it to never before seen size map with the same amount of regions and tons of room in between them. Now we're like thinking like, okay, these regions that would have never, ever, ever fit in any map ever before can now be discussed again and like talked about. Like, think about, not in this release, but in future, the port of Athens was so important to Athens and the Antigonids. It was fought over, and it basically was the life or death for Athens. I mean, without the port, they couldn't receive goods, and it was just such an important thing for them. And the Antigonids, they knew that, and so they kept control over it, basically starved out the Athenians. And that's how Athens pretty much lost its independence to Macedon early on in like our game time frame, right? No mod's been able to represent that except if like they're only focusing on Greece. And so we're excited because it's not going to be an 050, but in the future we're like, oh my god, we can actually put this in now, and other examples of that, right? So it's just really exciting Jorloff, we call him the wizard. I mean, he really is a wizard because he can do so many cool things. But we're really excited for this map, not just for this release, but for the future, because it really allows us to represent the ancient world that you read about in the books, and the tribes and the city-states and the cultures. Really brings you into a deeper level of detail, whereas before with mods, you were limited so much and you just had to pick the best 200 regions. I think that's the main thing to get excited about. And then for like people who love history, everything has been completely researched to like the T. Our historians have done an amazing job. We filled out the spreadsheet and it's so jam-packed of information, and we have taken that and we've applied it to the map. Majority of these can be looked up and read about. Some of them can't because they're very rare texts that we got them from. A lot of translations had to be done. It was intense work, but we want to be able to educate the player, and we don't want false cities or regions. So everything that's in this map is got some type of source or reasoning behind it. That's what we're excited about. Is we're excited that people are going to be getting a really immersive map that is history first and then gameplay right alongside it.
You can also look forward to a lot of like smaller details that there's going to be so many that can't really list them, but small little things that you might not even notice are different, but they are different. And once you kind of like go back and don't have that tiny little difference, you might think, hey, I thought this was that, but no, it's actually a part of the mod. And we have a lot of little things like that that are just to add kind of like, just to make the mod a little bit different, to make it stand out a little bit better.
There's been some personalization of the visuals. It's pretty nice.
Honestly, like the new units, man. Looking at those new units in the battles is pretty magical, especially if you've been involved with the creation of the new units, as well as our historians and our researchers. They will literally show us like images from like tombs that were excavated, archaeological sites, kind of like ancient artifacts, and then they say, this should be in the mod. And then someone on the team goes and basically draws that or makes that, and then it's on a unit. It's nothing else like it. So I love the new units. Obviously I love the map too, but just seeing those new units like in all their glory and just all their detail is really incredible to me.
As has been made very clear, this new map is a game changer. My question is, how exactly does this map change the way people play Rome Total War?
The jump from 05, from 042, like what's released now, to what's coming out soon, the biggest change really is the map. I'm a lot more, eager to work on stuff in the future past the map. Like the map was the basis for the amazing game that we will create on the map, but you can't do that without the map first, right? For 0.5, it's the map, because the map is beautiful and it's massive. There's so many cities. And you can really just scan over it once you open it up and just imagine the possibilities of campaigns that you can play later on when, gameplay systems are a little bit more fleshed out. It's elevating Total War to an almost like Crusader Kings level of size and detail. Or paradox, I guess, if you don't know what Crusader Kings is.
Oh, I know, my friend, I know.
First of all, with RTRIS, the economy that's in the game right now in 4.2 and 0.5 as well is based on other mods that were made previously before. Specifically, a lot of like campaign and economic balancing comes from another mod called Extended Realism, which Ahowl is a big fan of. One of the main things that does is fertility values for most cities are much lower than in vanilla, but are proportional to what they would be in vanilla. So certain cities are still going to be worth a lot more than other cities, so they'll grow faster and they'll make more money from farming, but they still generate less than vanilla, because in vanilla it's really quite easy to have a huge economy with just a few cities once you have some sea trade and some farms built. So this reduction of fertility kind of makes it so that each city grows slower and makes less money, but as well as that, upkeep is a lot more expensive than vanilla on each unit. And in 0.5, upkeep is going to be even more expensive because we have so many cities, kind of like to help balance out how many, like otherwise, if we didn't make upkeep on units more expensive, everybody would have huge armies like pretty quickly. So we make units more expensive, so you kind of have to be more careful with how many units you're fielding at a time. And, realizing, hey, if I build this huge army, it's an investment. I'm going to have to pay for them. But at the same time, the army that I have built now, I can use to expand and protect my land. And it's a balancing act, because how much something is worth can be very subjective. You could think like, well, is this unit really worth that much money? And so it takes a lot of trial and error, and that's another reason that we took so long for this release, is because we were trying to figure out like about how much should something cost in proportion to everything else in the world, because we're basically at this point creating a whole new world that, like I said, has not really been done before. So it takes a lot of experimentation to get it right.
Since so much has been changed and improved on a scale previously unseen, you also made the hard choice to at least temporarily remove the government feature. What exactly made you do it?
Well, it was never planned. I'll say that. It was never planned back in March to remove those things. I believe we removed those things more as consequence or sacrifice to the map and the Hellenistic units. I think it was sometime in the summer where I think it was just kind of like, you know what, like there's just so much going on. We were in the midst of having like these big, huge debates on government systems, right? And we actually had on beta an Antigonid government system and an Epirot government system. We put a ton of effort into the Epirot government system, and I remember we had so many debates over the finest details. I remember kind of taking a step back and like, this is before, by the way, like when the map became like this huge map. It was just the map at that point. I remember thinking like, man, like we're getting way too far ahead of ourselves here. Like we are putting the cart way before the horse. We're not prioritizing correctly. I'm not prioritizing correctly. I'm getting caught up in all these what ifs and ideas and these systems and these mechanics, and we don't even have the base mechanics figured out yet with this map. And so I kind of just said, hey guys, like we should probably not do this, at least for right now. I don't think this is relevant to our release. We actually put out a roadmap as a kind of like, we thought it would be a great idea. And I think it is a good idea for like companies like Paradox, and I get it. They need their fans to be engaged in what's going on, but it's hard to put out a roadmap and then follow up with it. So we learned that firsthand. There was just things that we hadn't even touched yet, whether it be new stuff or stuff that was already in the mod that needed to be cleaned up or adjusted or updated. And so, yeah, one by one, we kind of just started taking things out. So yes, we took out new government systems. Then we took out the current government system, which was basically like the Roman allied and annexation. We took that out. It's just not, the way it was constructed, it just wasn't in line with what we were wanting to do. And so we just said, well, let's just start from scratch. We realized how much work the legions were going to be. And so the legions require a lot of scripting and hidden resources that are tied in with the map. And our map's still not finished. So even though we're releasing the map, our map regions are not finished yet. That's going to be something you see in the next release, is finalized regions. And so there's really no sense in creating a system that's based off the regions until the regions themselves are finished. And so again, it was just kind of like taking our clutter of ideas and kind of like writing them on paper and saying and thinking logically, okay, like what should be the order of things? If this is going to be done, it needs to be done correctly, and it needs to be done in due process. And so what is that due process? And legions and governments and some of the other things were just so far down the list, and they were not going to make it in for this release. And I know they're really popular. It's not like they're never coming back. They're going to be back, and the releases that they're going to be back in, the releases are going to be centered around them. So when we do bring back the legions, it's going to be a release that's focused on the legions. I don't know if it's going to be all government systems for every single faction. I think it might be focused on more one faction or two factions, because we want to do it right. And I think fans will appreciate that, because it's not hurried and rushed and slopped together. It's more, wow, they really took 90 days to focus on this one faction's government system, and it plays really nicely, and it really makes this faction so much more interesting to play as. We would want to do the legions right. Instead of slopping them together on the map and you have like 5 different legionary units to recruit in one city, put these legionary units historically where they were recruited. And so if you're in Spain, you get whatever Hispanic legions there were. And if you're in Macedon, you get the Macedonica Legion or whatever. I'm not well versed in it, but point is, we want to do it correctly. And so it's better to strip it away right now and bring it back in properly than to just kind of throw it out there really messily and have low quality gaming experience.
I don't want to say removed, they were simplified. In the previous release, 4.2, when you took a city that didn't belong to your culture or your faction originally, you would have to build a government building, and then as you upgraded that government building, you would start unlocking better troops. We've simplified that so that instead of a government building with multiple levels, it's just one government building that unlocks the ability to recruit all troops, and then you just have to upgrade the barracks or the stables or the range to get the troops. But before, you would have to upgrade the government as well as the barracks. And that's just to make it a little bit easier to manage. The second feature that we kind of simplified was the public order from religion penalty. Basically, what would happen in the previous version, 4.2, is when you would build your government building, the government building would start converting the religion of the settlement, and then this would start causing public order unrest. So you would really have to make sure that you could start basically changing the settlement's religion to be able to get your troops. We decided to simplify this so that you still have to build a religion colony building, is what we're calling it. It's a colony that will start converting that settlement to a different religion. So, for example, Roman religion, Celtic religion, and technically these are cultures, but in game terms, it's called religion. So when the city is like 100% Roman or 50% Roman, 50% Carthaginian, whatever. We made it so that public order doesn't get affected by religion, because we're hoping to eventually be able to reflect that most cities were not just one single type of culture. They were a melting pot of like a little bit of Greek, a little bit of Italian, a little bit of Phoenician, a little bit of Celtic, whatever. And then depending on how much of that religion or culture is present, that will kind of determine what you can build and what you can recruit in that city. So that's why we chose to simplify that culture and religion feature that was in the previous version of the mod. And like I said, we're plan on making entire new buildings, entire new building systems, entire new city management systems, hopefully with the next update. But if we keep saying, well, we're not going to release until this is ready and this is ready, then you'll never get a release.
I think any player that played the release that we have out now, which I think is, 0.42, and they play 0.5, they'll see that some things have been removed, like the government buildings. But I think they'll play the campaign for 10, 20, 30 turns, and they'll actually understand that it was a good idea to take out some of the things that we did, because there were systems that weren't really fully developed yet. They weren't working well. We've made the map 10 times as complicated as 0.4, so we had to dumb the systems down a tiny bit, because, for one, the governments just weren't that well fleshed out. They didn't work too well on the new map. So the game will work very well on 0.5 on the new map. Everything that's there now will be twice as complicated in a year. So it's definitely playable, but I would not look at it and be like, oh, it's never going to get better. All they did was make the map and they're not going to change the buildings or anything, everything will change. It's all subject to change. And working with these guys, it will all only get better. I've been with the team for 8 months now, just playing and constantly watching the game evolve, and it's gotten exponentially better from when I started playing.
We just need time. The more time that goes by, the more things will be developed. We're trying to basically create deadlines for ourselves without overwhelming ourselves with tons of work and then never finishing.
And speaking of never finishing, every developer feels a sense of urgency in terms of finishing their products, both on part of the receiver, but also for one's own sake. I know the RIS team likes to set deadlines for releases, so what to you are the main motivations for doing just that, even when things can take 6 months?
Yeah, I would say you kind of nailed it. It's both, I've been around the modding scene for a long time, and I watched mods on Total War Center back in the day have these amazing previews and these amazing plans and these lofty goals, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that and this has never been seen before and all this stuff, and it's it goes quiet, and then people are like, is this dead? Is this dead?
Yeah.
This can't come back. Where's so-and-so at? And it's kind of nothing ever got done, and they were working on it for years, or the solo project, and it's they never did it. I think what happens is most modders that I know of and work with are perfectionists, and so you want it to be perfect, and you're not going to release it until it's perfect. Thing is, it's never perfect. You put a lot of pressure on yourself and a lot of strain on yourself, and then it just becomes too much, and then something happens in your life. you get a new job, you get into a relationship, or you have a child, or somebody passes away, or you have to move, or something just changes, or maybe you just lose your passion. And then this project that you had advertised and, put out there for everybody to see is nothing. And it's just like screenshots at this point. And then the screenshots get taken down because time withers away and, you lose your screenshots on Photo Bucket or whatever it was back then.
Yeah.
And then your mod basically just withers away. And it was like, people then it's like a whisper. It's like, oh yeah, remember that mod that never got released? Yeah, that guy was really talented. I wonder what happened to him. Yeah, you should have put out like his files or something so somebody else could pick it up. So for me, it's kind of like, I want to get my stuff out there and I want critique. I want to hear feedback, and then also it's definitely an achievement for us. Like we feel really good about ourselves when we put a release out. It's almost like a little bit of a dopamine hit. It's like, wow, we just did that. The morning of release, when I wake up, it's going to be like, what's all the news? What are people saying? We love it when you guys put out like the YouTube videos. It just makes us feel like heard and respected, and people are paying attention. And it's like, oh my god, like what we're making actually means something, not just to us, but like to a broader community. And then for the players too, like we understand that Rome Remastered was literally just a remaster, and they did a ton of work under the hood for us because they knew we existed. We kind of are what are going to drive this game, and so we put pressure on ourselves to make it good. And so when we release things, we feel good. And that's why we decided to do the 2, because we wanted to feel good about our work, and shortchanging ourselves on a short release for what we're trying to do here wasn't fair to anybody. So I think you and everybody that plays it is going to appreciate the time that we put into it, but do not expect us to do something like that again unless it's like dire circumstances.
Have you ever experienced anything during this dev cycle that has given you a new appreciation for Rome Remastered? A revelation of, oh wow, now this is possible, or something you figured out and you went eureka, or anything like that?
There's been a lot of people who had concerns about Rome Remastered, and those concerns were totally valid, because in the past there's been some game releases that were not great. I'm not going to say any names specifically, but there's been some disappointments with games in the past. So when Rome Remastered came out and I was hearing about it, I was pretty skeptical. I was like, okay, cool, Rome Remastered, and it sounds cool, but I don't know yet. And then, because I was friends with Ahal, and I had been helping him out with his other mods that he would do for the original Rome Total War, we were talking and just kind of seeing all of the old kind of limitations that were in the game previously, that people were like, man, I wish in Rome Total War I could have more factions, or more buildings, or more armies, or more this, more that, whatever. And then saying hey, Rome Remastered, all that stuff that you ever wanted for Rome Total War is coming. It's a thing now. You can do it. You can have a huge map if you want. You can have as many factions as you want. You can have units with variation in as many units as you want. So you don't have to be like, well, if we add this unit, we won't be able to add that unit, so we have to compromise. So Rome Remastered really does give you so much more as far as modding capabilities. All these old kind of limits that used to exist are basically either gone, or the limits are basically much higher, so you can do so much more. I think people didn't really realize that. A lot of people say oh, well, Rome Remastered is just Rome Total War with nicer graphics, but it's really so much more than that. And I don't want to say that just our mod, because there's a lot of other really nice mods for Rome Total War Remastered, especially Total Conquest and Chivalry Total War, just to name a few off the top of my head. They are also doing a lot of really cool stuff, and a lot of stuff that we haven't even gotten to kind of play around with yet in our own mod. But this game just takes the modding potential and it's exponential now. It's so much more you can do. And so if you love RIS, but you say bad things about Rome Remastered, you just don't realize, because everything that RIS is and everything that all these other really great mods are only possible because of Rome Remastered. Without it, there would be none of these great mods that are so interesting and detailed.
The RIS team naturally gets a ton of questions about their mod, and when asking what they're mostly asked, I got some particularly fun responses.
People are obsessed with 4 turns per year. And it's something that we obviously are going to talk about at some point, but we don't care right now, you know? Like, we got like 900 plus regions and stuff. We're just trying to make sure it works. And so if it comes, it'll come later. And so like there's that, and there's some things that were in 040 that aren't in 050, like the legions. Like we're not having the legions just because we didn't have time to get them in properly. Let's see what else. No Corinthian helmets. I literally had a guy messaging me today asking me about Corinthian helmets. I'm like, no, but I want the Spartans to look cool. It's like, well, go play vanilla then. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
And I guess a natural question for me to ask then is 4 turns per year, when?
I know, right? That'd be hilarious. Oh my god. So first of all, okay, like I need to understand, maybe people can put this in the comments. I need to understand the desire, the strong, obsessive desire for 4 turns per year. I get messaged about it. People literally will join the server and just simply ask about it. I need to understand why. I've heard something about character roleplay, but if you look at it, it's with 2 turns per year, you get 120 years or turns for the average character. And so you'd think that would be enough time for character roleplay. When you double that, that's a lot of turns for character roleplay. And it's like, is it needed? Now, there are some benefits to 4 turns per year that I'm not going to discuss now because we still need to discuss them as a team. But there's also drawbacks to it too. And it's such a feature that is not very important in the grand scheme of things to us that it's so far down our list. So that's the first thing. I kind of want to know why it's so important. What else? Corinthian helmets. So if you don't know what a Corinthian helmet is, go watch 300, and every single helmet that the Spartans wear, that's a 300. That's a Corinthian helmet. And people love that helmet. It is super badass. You know, Leonidas, and this is Sparta. I get it. Well, it just was not worn in this point in time in history. It was just not a thing. Maybe on the off chance it was, maybe later in history it was reintroduced for like an officer, but it's not so important that we felt the need to include it. And we're not the type of people that are gonna include things just for fanfare. We want to do this right. We want to abide by the sources as much as we can, and there's just no sources for it. Those are like 2 of the main ones that is just like super weird that we get asked about a lot. Do you have any like basic questions that you think like people would be asking?
Well, when are you going to make a proper Spartan faction, dude?
Oh god, yeah. I know, with dudes in like underwear and capes and 6-packs. Yeah, you know, that's our secret, right? That's what we're working on right now. No, I'm never. It's actually never going to happen. There's an old vanilla mod for Rome Total War that actually has the 300 style Spartans as a unit. Just saying. So you guys can go get your hands on Rise of Empire.
But they're not in 4K, are they? They're not in that sweet 4K.
No, definitely not. Nope, they're not. See, they're not Ultra HD,
yeah,
OLED TV style. Like, so too bad. But actually, Sparta as a faction was super weak in our time period. They had a renaissance where they had a chance to maybe be somebody, but they just didn't have enough manpower. They had too much pride, and they were a little bit behind the times when it came to how they functioned as a society. And because of that, the Achaean League and the Antigonids pretty much overshadowed them the entirety of our mod time frame. And so we want to represent that. There is we have like a top tier Spartan unit, but compared to like all the other factions units that are like bigger and more powerful, they're inferior. So the best Spartan unit is an inferior unit to other factions' best units. And that's the way it should be. People are going to play as Sparta, but expect a challenge. It's not going to be an easy game to be Sparta. This isn't 500 BC Sparta. This is 270 BC Sparta. I guess what we want to do is we want to educate. We want to take the Hollywood out and put reality in as best as we can while still having a fun game.
Any suggestion that I see, whether it's in a YouTube comment or posted in our Discord chat, yes, we have talked about basically at length, but have decided either not yet. Yeah, mainly the main answer will be not yet, but in some cases it doesn't quite work for what we're trying to do, so we don't want to use that at the moment. For example, a lot of people request 4 turns per year instead of 2 turns per year. For a long time, our answer was like, no, we're not going to do that. But now, with the new map, we're kind of thinking, maybe we will do 4 turns per year. That's not a promise, but basically nothing is set in stone. except that the longer we work on stuff, the more perfected and the more advanced things will get. But we just need patience, basically, from people. And we appreciate all the enthusiasm and love and, appreciation that people give us. But we also need people to realize, like, we have jobs, we have families, we have lives, we have all this stuff going on top of, modding for however many hours a week some people spend on that. I know some of us take more breaks than others. Some of us are a little more fanatic about modding. We will get there eventually, is the main answer. It's basically a living and growing thing. It's not a stagnant thing by any means.
Continuing with the player base now, what you hear over and over again is that more cities means more siege battles, which apparently people hate now. At the same time, they want more depth and historical realism. How do you respond to that?
The thing that people kind of have to realize is they want more cities, they want more factions, they want more regions, they want more this, they want more that. Well, if we're going to have that many cities, yes, there are going to be more siege battles, but we're already trying to think of ways to make field battles have more of an impact on the campaign map, whether that's using scripts or like regional capitals, so that you can have, like, if you take this one city, neighboring cities will kind of fall to you as well. We haven't worked that out yet, but that's something that we're definitely thinking about. It's just the ambition that we had with this release, and we took much longer on this release than we normally would take. Our plan is to basically do a release roughly every 2 to 3 months, but this release we took about 5 or 6 months instead because we wanted to get the map ready. But the map is just going to be a foundation for much more complicated mechanics and much more complicated gameplay. But we can't do everything at once. So the map is going to be like the foundation of the house. And once that foundation is built, we'll be able to start adding the walls and the windows and the decorations. And we're doing it for free. So we're trying to do the work in a smart way so that we're not overwhelmed and then unable to finish.
The foundation might be a siege fest, but, once we figure out where to go from there, because, like Moska's saying, most of this update was just the map. Because for any modded map, this is the biggest one.
There's also the matter of difficulty, of course, and RIS is on the harder side of the mod spectrum. A lot of people struggle with the income levels at the beginning of the game. So what exactly do you have to say to those unfortunate souls who find themselves in 20k deficit on turn 1?
Well, why they're losing 20k is purely just how we designed it. But it's not impossible to get out of that deficit. Like, if you start up a campaign and you have 20 cities or something, I'll just give an example. This is not going to be accurate. You're going to have 20 cities as Rome. You're going to have a certain amount of units spread across the map. There's going to be a couple rebel cities around you. And you're probably going to have a deficit of maybe like 5 to 10k a turn, even more. But you'll have enough money and military in the starting turns to build farms in every city that you can. That's the most important thing. Always build farms, because farms are what make money in this mod more than anything else. You'll build something that increases your trade, and it actually lowers your income because you have no trade yet. But farms will pretty much always make you money. So always build farms. And if you have negative 10,000 at the start of a campaign as your income, look at your armies, because you probably have enough units to go and take some cities. So it is a little bit challenging, and it's not probably what we're going to be making them like in the future, I don't think. I think a lot of people, even on the dev team, want to start making the campaign starts challenging, but also not having the player start with a negative income, 500 or 1,000, instead of having like negative 10,000. The way it is designed now, it's basically just take the units that you have and go conquer stuff. You will overcome that deficit if you do that and build farms.
We know that a lot of people don't like the negative money start, and that is likely not going to be as common in the 0.5 release. We're already kind of at work on that, like Vic Boss said. But really, there's a couple tips. Like, if you are in negative income, a couple of things that you should be doing is make sure you spend every penny of the starting money that you have, whether it's on building buildings or recruiting new units or whatever. And like Vic Boss said, take the armies that you start with and go take some cities. Because the first 10 to 20 turns, in basically any Total War game is what makes or breaks your campaign. And if you can just survive those 10 to 20 turns to a point where you basically have a stable income and have 1 or 2 armies walking around, you should never full on lose the game to the point where you lose all your cities and die. Like, that should never happen. And something else I encourage players to think about is, just because you lose one city or a couple cities doesn't mean that your campaign is over and that you've lost. In a lot of cases, it's okay to sacrifice an army or to sacrifice a city and come back and defeat them later. A lot of times what the AI will do is they'll conquer your city, and then there'll be a full stack in the city, and then 2 turns later, you come back and that army's gone, and you can just take the city right back. Losing a couple cities in the middle of your campaign is not the end of the world, and you can completely recover from that. You just have to set yourself up for success, and since this is a strategy game, know when you need to make a sacrifice so that you can keep the big picture going. Because I think some people struggle with realizing, is it worth, for example, sacrificing the whole army to protect this city, or am I better off keeping my army alive and taking the city back later? Knowing how to make those decisions will go a long way in your ability to manage the campaign map.
Of course, with a campaign like this with its map and features, it's all of a sudden become much more Paradox-like in its complexity and focus on strategy, rather than just battle tactics, I'd say.
And that's something that we're hoping for, because pretty much anyone who's played a fair amount of Total War games will know that the battles can be a lot of fun, but that really the kind of campaign map and strategic planning aspect of it is not really as good as a lot of other games. And we're hoping that as time goes on, we can really make the strategy aspect of this,
We don't want it to develop to, you play 100 turns, you've conquered, the strongest guys around you, and there's nothing left to do but paint the rest of the map because there's no challenge left. We want it to be there's something there that happens, and you have to deal with that. And that will come with time. And scripts. Many scripts.
So let's say if you're a returning player, or perhaps someone that loves your mod but finds it hard, or just someone who wants a heck of a good time, what is the faction you'd recommend they start with?
There's been a lot of work done on the Greek factions, so I would definitely lean towards one of them. And you have a couple choices. I would probably go with the Antigonid Kingdom. Or possibly, if you want to play a smaller campaign situated in Greece, you have so many options. I know, there's a million people who love Sparta, so anyone who loves Greece and wants to do a small campaign, and you love Sparta, you love the movie 300, go for them. If you're more of a philosophical fanboy, you can play Athens. They're a small one city-state faction, I think, in the new map. That's another good one. I would definitely recommend one of the Greek factions, though, because that is what a lot of the artwork has been done on for the new units. It's really impressive to look at.
I agree with Big Boss that one of the Greek factions, or Hellenistic factions, if you want to be pedantic about it,
Always.
would be a good choice. I think Rome is always a good choice if you're not that good at campaign management or battles, either one, because with the Romans, you don't have to try too hard and you'll still win. And we want Rome to be one of the easier factions because we know that it's going to be one of the more popular factions. So people who don't have as much experience with the game are probably going to be drawn to it. You basically have a lot of land, really good units. The enemies nearby are not going to necessarily be easy to beat, but if you put the whole might of Rome, if you will, they're gonna have a hard time against you. I really do think Rome is one of the strongest factions in the game at the moment. I personally really love playing as the Macedonians as well as Epirus. You could think of Epirus as like a little baby Macedon almost, where it's in a similar position, and it also has new units, but it's a lot smaller, because with Macedon in the new map, you start with quite a few cities. And most of those cities that you start with are not very developed. So we kind of wanted to reflect that with Macedon. The guy who's the king of Macedon at this point, he doesn't have a very strong grasp on power yet, and he has to spend a lot of time kind of rebuilding his power. But they're not going to be a difficult faction by any means. It's just it might be a little bit different pace than what some people might expect. Because you're not the same Macedon that was existing 100 years earlier with Alexander the Great.
Macedon is a nice faction for someone who is new to the mod, doesn't really know how the mechanics work too well. Probably should pick Rome or Macedon, which is the Antigonid kingdom in the mod.
Right, and the Antigonid kingdom is obviously part of the Hellenistic and Greek cultural sphere here. What exactly made you choose to remaster the Hellenistic units first? Even before Rome itself, actually? And can we get a hint on which factions might be next?
We started with the Hellenic kingdoms, mainly Egypt, Macedon, Seleucid, Bactria. Those are kind of like the main headlines. And we decided to go with these guys first because there's a lot of shared armor and shared clothing pieces that are going to be common, not just within the Greeks and the Hellenic people, but also further out in the world. So by starting with them first, we're kind of starting a base for all the other Greek factions, but not just them, but also the other factions that kind of have similar gear or gear that the Greeks copied from other cultures. So we kind of have a base for the other factions ready to go as well. But those are not the only factions that have new unit models and textures. At the moment, tons of factions have new units and models, including Syracuse, Epirus, Athens, the Aetolian League and Achaean League have a couple new things. Cyrene has new things. Pergamon has new things. Pontus has new things. The Bosporan Kingdom has new things. But they're not going to have a fully new roster. Right now, our goal is just that the main Hellenic factions, the successor kingdoms, have a fully new roster is the goal. But most of the other factions have a mix of old and new. And as for what's next, I can't say exactly what we're going to do next, but we're hoping to kind of tackle what we think are going to be the fan favorites.
It kind of goes without saying that this dev cycle was long, both for you guys who did all the hard work, and for us who love playing the latest version of your mod. Can we assume that the next dev cycle will be shorter and perhaps smaller than the last one?
Smaller, but think about this. Okay, like this is what we are, this is what we're about, and this is what we're aiming to do, and have fun with what we're putting out right now, but it's not like, this isn't really us. This is kind of like 010 through 040 was like us throwing a bunch of other stuff that's already made together into this pot and just saying, here you go play it. There was a lot of stuff to clean up, and there's still stuff to clean up. 050 is genuinely 100% like RIS is starting to become like a brand, I feel like, for like our work. We're not using the Mundus and Magnus map, we're using our own map. We're not using RS2 unit, well, we are, but we're transitioning away from RS2 units to RIS units. And as we keep going, we're going to have a more and more like originality to what we bring. And it's not going to be stuff that's necessarily like, oh, we just took it from this mod and used it. It's now like, we took it from this mod and we used it as a source and then made this. That's kind of what we're doing now. So I feel like this is our base. So you think about the house, you think of like the foundation, the cement. And then after this, the walls and the beams, and, you know, as you complete the house, you get a little bit more detailed with each area that you're working on. And so it's going to be exciting when we're getting to the finer details of things, where it's like these super cool mechanics that have never been done before, and like these super immersive systems. Like, but right now we have to do the base work. We have to lay the foundation, and it's hard because we all want to get into the really cool fun stuff, but we're not going to be able to do that until the basics of Rome Total War are kind of manipulated and molded to fit our gigantic map and all of our factions and stuff like that.
That's the plan. Is this time around we did a update after about 6 months, but after this we're really hoping that to have an update once every 2 months to 3 months. Even if the updates are not necessarily going to be as massive as this one, but they'll be more frequent. So it's probably going to feel like you're getting more content more regularly. That's something that we want to bring to people so that people know, yeah, the mod's still around, yeah, we're still alive, and yeah, we're still working on it.
In terms of the mod's future, what I'm dying to know is, how far can this thing even go? The mod has already blown up past limits, but what might we be able to see in the future? I'm personally thinking emergent factions or even formidable factions maybe. Is this possible?
That's a really good question, and it'd be hard to give you like an exact answer. I can give you a very broad answer and just say yes. I don't think there's anything that you've listed there that couldn't be done. I think it can all be done. It's kind of like how I talked about the house. It's kind of like it has to be in order. And I know it sounds so robotic and so stiff and dull of me to say that, but if you're going to have those mechanics, you want them to actually be entertaining and challenging and fun, not empty. I think like right now, if we were to add any of those mechanics, they'd be very, very empty. So it is possible. Let's see, you listed emergent factions. Definitely possible. We actually have one emergent faction right now. It's not like anything crazy. It's just the old Greek cities faction. They'll just pop up on Revolt in a Greek region, an extra thorn in your side. If I remember correctly, with Rome Remastered, you can turn a faction into another faction if you meet like certain requirements. It's similar to how when you are playing as Denmark in Medieval 2, when you conquer Norway, you can create the Kalmar Union.
Right.
I believe that mechanic is in. And I think Total Conquest uses it a little bit. But you can also like be a horde, conquer a certain settlement, and like if you conquer a certain settlement, you become a new faction with a new band, like new colors and stuff too. So there's definitely a little bit of paradox themed features that are possible. We're just not there yet. We want to be there desperately, trust me. But if we were to bypass everything else, the quality of those features is not going to be as great as we imagine them to be in our head. So the future for us is, now that we have this big, pretty map, it's to refine it, mold it, I guess beat it up, shake it up, and make it really good. It's good for 050. It's going to do a good job. It's not super buggy or glitchy, but we now need to take it to the next level. And so the next few months, I'm going to be learning the ins and outs of Rome Total War's systems, and then learning how to apply those systems to the now gigantic scale. All these systems were made for that little itty bitty Rome Total War vanilla map. And it's kind of like, okay, well, now how do we take those mechanics and make them work really well with this huge map so that everything flows nicely and the game feels natural? Because we don't want to like heavily script everything, because the more scripting you do, the less sandboxy it becomes. It takes a heavy toll on your system if you're just scripting the entire game. As time flies by and as time goes by, next thing you know, we'll be talking about the craziest features, like where something happens as a Seleucid player. Maybe you destroy the Temple of Jerusalem, or you build a Greek temple in Jerusalem. You spark a revolt, and the revolt leads to the Hasmoneans appearing as a faction, and then they just become like almost impossible to defeat, and then next thing you know, you lose it, and now you're weaker than the Ptolemies. Of course, we want to add stuff like that. It's just going to take some time.
I'm personally a big fan of the Senate mechanic from the vanilla game, at least the concept of it. But many mods remove this feature altogether. Might this feature make a glorious return at some point? Somehow?
It'll be added back in. I'll just say that much. How it's going to be added back in, I will not get into. I have had this idea that I've kicked around forever, and it should benefit the player, and it should also benefit the AI. We'll see what happens. If it works, and then when we reveal it, me and you might be talking about it in depth then, and I'll explain it. That's if it goes according to plan. Obviously, a lot of things, especially in modding, don't go according to plan. But yeah, that feature is taken out of so many different mods, and I want to add it back in. The question is, how? Something with the Romans will happen. It's not going to be vanilla, that's for sure. So you're not going to get Julii, Scipii, Senate. We'd never do that. But there's other ways to do it. And then we look at other factions and see like what their governments were like, and research civil wars or uprisings or their internal politics, and see if there's like a way for it to apply. There's another feature that we've yet to add from original Rome Total War Barbarian Invasion, that's loyalty. So there's things out there that have yet to be really tapped into. Those are the things that are closer. Original Rome Total War mechanics that we kind of have history modding already. We're getting closer to adding these things. So yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I'm just not sure when exactly.
You mentioned in the beginning, how nobody wants their mod to die and for photos to become unavailable on Photobucket or whatever. That sentence really triggered me because it brought back some very sad moments from the Total War Center back in the day, when certain mods just ended kinda. There was this one mod from Total War back in 2008 that got me extremely hyped. I think the mod leader there was called Magpie. Does that ring any bells?
Rise of the Nations Total War. Yeah.
Oh my god, yeah, because that got me really hyped for like, a few years, but then nothing really came of it, I think.
Honestly, that was one of the mods I was thinking about when I was telling you. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I think the leader or the founder is like Hasriarch. I don't know. But he made like these amazing units. Then there's like that magpie guy. And I guess his profile picture was him. He seemed like an older man.
Yeah, true, yes.
Like he was like in charge of the map. And like they were always talking about what they were doing, but there was never like a beta or, hey, play this, give us your thoughts. Yeah. It was just, we're doing this and we're doing this and it's going to be amazing and blah, blah, blah. And then it never happened. They disappeared. Who knows what happened? But little known secret is I actually got access to their mod files a long time ago. And I remember being extremely excited to see what I was about to get into. And there wasn't a whole lot. I was just like, what the? I remember it was much younger than I am now. And I was just so disappointed.
Yeah.
Where's all the cool stuff?
I'm really happy that you remember it, because I was, trying to be a part of that mod team somehow back in like 2008 or something. It's just so long ago. Not that I could mod or anything, but like just to do anything to be on the inside.
Well, that was the golden age of Rome Total War modding. You had Europa Barbarorum and Rome Total Realism were head-to-head, and then Roma Surrectum was good, but Roma Surrectum 2 was being developed. EB2 was being developed, and then you had like a ton of vanilla mods out there that were very popular. I mean, that was an amazing, crazy time for modding, and I think that was like that was supposed to be like the next big mod. Just never panned out, and it's sad, but that's modding, and I think present-day modders can learn from that. It's like, hey, like if you're going to start something, even if you can't finish it, put your files out for other people to take. Because it's a community thing. It's a community effort. And somebody that was following you might really want to see that mod become something if you can't finish it. And they'll take it and maybe they'll put their spin on it. And it just becomes something. And instead of lost to the depths of the internet. That's what I would encourage people to do. If you can't finish it, just put what you've done out there and let people take it and run with it.
Ahau is of course the mod leader, but a project like this demands the combined efforts of a whole group of dedicated, motivated, and hardworking people. Tell us more about your team at RIS.
Yeah, so RIS isn't just me, obviously. I'm kind of the face, but I've mentioned a few other names. So we have Tone. Tone's our co-leader, great guy. He's been around the modding scene for a long, long time, more than me. He was one of the lead developers for Roma Surrectum 2. He made all the Roma Surrectum 2 units, and to be able to work with him is a real honor. I've learned a lot from him, not about just modding, but like life and patience and planning and leadership. So he's a really good man. He's going to be the one that you guys can look to as far as the units. Then there's Joroloff. I've said before, we call him the Wizard. An amazing guy. He's very smart. He's very creative, super knowledgeable when it comes to cultures. I believe he's a professional historian and archaeologist. I mean, some of the places he's been to and texts that he's read and things that he's researched is absolutely amazing. So you can thank him for our map, for some of the submods, like the crate. We're going to have a crazy submod. I won't say what, but it's got some crazy stuff in it that will make you think of Europa Barbarorum. We call him the Wizard because he can do just about anything. You have Mosca Flocka is his name. He is our class clown or our joker of the bunch. He's really good because he's passionate in what he does, and he never really modded before this, and he's become a pretty good modder. Really great guy. There's Masilos, our lead historian. Been knowing him for years, and I rely on him so heavily for so many different things. And the list could go on. We have Rex, our Seleucid expert. We have Swagger, who's in charge of a lot of AI and graphics work. We have Apple, who does a lot of the music and public relations. Maritz, unsung Maritz, he is so good at administration and just keeping the team together, as well as ideas and keeping things in line. Luke, our everyday coder who can pretty much figure out any kind of coding issue really quickly. One of the smartest people I've worked with. Our team goes on and on. Just to name a few, you have Vic Boss, who's an amazing tester. Jotl, who's an amazing researcher and historian in his own right. Exy, and the artist teams like Refract and Balbor and Iambic. Naked Spur, that dude is responsible for all of the faction symbols and the faction banners. He's from Sweden, I think, and you just call on him and he'll just do it. And it's just really good guy. And Andy, I can't tell you, like, it's so amazing how many dudes have come together on this team, and like we work together every day and we're constantly in contact with each other, and we're all from all over the world. Genava, he's our Celtic expert. Raptor, our Germanic expert. Like I said, the list could go on, and to have this great of a mod, you have to have great people. And everybody that I've listed and all the people that I've forgotten about, they're all amazing people in their own right. We'll definitely have a team list out when we release, and I would really encourage all the players to really read it and see whose role was what, because they really shined through. And we're all staying together. Nobody's leaving. We're coming back. And we're going to keep making this, and it's going to be really, really awesome. They all deserve to have their name put out there. So I just wanted them to feel that. And again, if I forgot any of you, you guys can feel to get into my DMs and let me have it. And I also want to thank you, Andy, and all the other YouTubers who have been, you know, helping us and putting our stuff out there. Really appreciate the work that you guys do.
We appreciate all the work you do, giving attention and exposure to these mods that people really work so hard on. So we really appreciate the work that you do too, Andy.
Helps get the word of the mod out too, because, you know, anyone who likes Total War should play this mod, because it's fucking good. That's really all it comes down to. You like Total War, you'll like the mod.
Well, there you go. A massive thanks to the RIS team for taking the time to talk to me and for their work. A big congratulations on the completion of RIS version 0.5. And I say let's raise a virtual glass to the future as well. The latest RIS update launches on September 30, and what an update it's going to be. If you've ever wondered when to get ROM Remastered or to jump into this mod, well, there's been no better time than right now. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to the channel. And if you want more information on the RIS mod, check out the Discord link below. And finally, I really hope you'll consider supporting the channel by becoming a YouTube member or a patron. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!